Max, how you doing,
Andy,
bud? How are you,
how are you?
sir? Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. How's your
All
week
right.
been so far?
It's good.
Awesome. I got to tell
Yeah.
you, man, I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since our last one.
I love it.
Yeah. So I'm super pumped that we could put together some time today and do this.
Likewise, I feel very much the same way.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be good. I mean, you and me both love talking about this stuff. So I think we're going to have a good time, and like hopefully anyone watching this will get some value out of the conversation, or at least we hope.
Excellent.
Cool.
Yeah, I love it.
So I got the recording going right now.
Great.
Figure we could just kind of freestyle this thing. I mean, I feel like
Sounds good.
we should have recorded the first one, which is why we kind of decided to circle back and do this again. But Andy, for anyone who's watching this, do you want to take a minute just to kind of like introduce yourself, talk about your agency a little bit, kind of your history with HubSpot, if you will, and kind of what you're working on right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Andy Steuer. I'm the CMO for WriteForMe. What we do is we help our clients execute on a content marketing strategy. We build teams for our clients. So we build a team of a content marketing manager, 2 to 3 writers, and an editor for our clients. And we build a content marketing roadmap in terms of what we do is we do a lot of research looking at where there are content gaps, what competitors are doing, what our clients' goals are. And then we align with our clients initially, even before we start doing any writing. We put together a free content marketing playbook that it takes all that information, leads with buyer personas, then identifies topics that those buyers are searching for and keywords that they're searching for. And we look at where there are opportunities for our clients to build this content roadmap.
Yeah.
And we actually build the roadmap as part of the playbook. So all of that is this free kind of upfront offering that we give to clients, whether they do the writing or whether we do the writing for them. It's a great way to start the relationship. And it's huge value. It's normally companies charge thousands of dollars for this kind of thing.
Yeah. That's
yeah.
huge.
Yeah, and we like to offer it for free up front because it gets us all aligned. It's a great way for us to build a relationship with our clients, and then we simply put a content calendar together after we align around that strategy, what the topics are, topic clusters, and then articles that we will write for our clients. So we put that all together in that playbook. And that's all free. And then from there, we get writing with our clients. So we put together a scope of work and then get cranking away.
There you go. Yeah. So tell me the story about like how you kind of got mixed into HubSpot, like where you first started using it, like how that relationship with HubSpot has kind of evolved since then, and kind of where you're at today.
Yeah, great question. So I've been a HubSpot user for a long time, even since very early days of HubSpot.
Nice.
Was always intrigued with the orientation that the company started out with, the whole inbound marketing strategy, which when HubSpot was starting was very much like SEO. It's kind of like repackaging it under this kind of framework. So rather than playing whack-a-mole with SEO,
It's very much a game of whack-a-mole sometimes.
which a lot of companies are doing, this is more of a framework kind of an approach. And when you follow these steps and this guideline, then you get results. And I always appreciated that kind of framework. And in fact, I think my first encounter with HubSpot was, there was a book written about what was it? It's called something like Marketing Secrets of the Grateful Dead. And I think Brian was a co-writer of that book. And I was so intrigued by that, being a fan of their music myself, and sort of like how they just went their own path. I thought, what an interesting book. And I read the book and then learned more about HubSpot, and that all just kind of like checked a lot of boxes for me up front. I'm like, I really like this company. Yeah.
Totally. Very cool. So like what I was thinking maybe we could do today, right? And we kind of talked about this a little bit on our first call where we were kind of getting to know each other. But you know, the idea of content is sort of like the 800,000-pound elephant in the room that like not a lot of people want to talk about, because it's one, the most important thing when it comes to not only inbound marketing, but I think really kind of inbound as a whole when you think of the flywheel holistically. So like it's the most important thing, but like two, it is also like the hardest thing to wrap your head around, right? And I'm sure you
Yes.
see a lot of that with your clients, because that's why they're coming to you, right? They can't get a hold on the content thing, whether it's just not understanding it or it's not having the people power or the wherewithal, the resources to pull it off, or they just don't know where to get started. So what I'm hoping we can do today maybe, and we can talk about a number of things. We can talk about content, we can talk about search engine optimization, blogging, downloadable stuff, like however we want to do this. But maybe what we can try to do our best to do today is try to demystify like the whole idea of content, and maybe, you know, anyone watching this conversation can hopefully just get a little bit more comfortable with the idea of creating your own content, right? Because, you know, as much as like your business thrives on doing the content for other people, like us as members of the inbound community, we want to do our best to like empower folks to do it on their own as well. Right. And, you know, I think there's a lot that we can probably pull out of this conversation that's going to be, you know, useful for those folks out there that maybe don't have the budget to hire a partner, but still need to do content, just because obviously you need to create content no matter what. You know, and at least get people like, you know, thinking about it and understanding the value of it and kind of going from there. So I'd love to ask you this, because you probably pull a lot of insight from this with a lot of the conversations you have with your customers, but like, what do you think are the biggest roadblocks that, you know, smaller companies or even bigger companies, but really any company that's going from, I'm just generally talking about myself, my product, and my company and news about my company online, versus making that transition into being like a content producer? Like, what do you think are some of the biggest roadblocks that like stop people from getting there? And maybe some folks watching this will, you know, find themselves in a familiar place, and we can help, you know, dig them out of there. And maybe we can start here. So like, what do you think are the biggest like roadblocks or things that stop people? Yeah.
I think a lot of it is, what do I write about next? It's writer's block, right? It's and what we do to avoid that is putting together this roadmap, and doing this initial brainstorm around this. So what we like to do is say, first, let's start around your buyer personas. I mean, that's the starting point, because that's the whole reason why you're writing the content in the first place, is to educate and engage prospects who are coming to your website. So you want to think about who these buyers are, name them, define them, put a profile around them. What do they, what websites do they go to? Where do they find their sources of information? What kind of questions are they asking in search? We all go to Google. Everybody loses sight of this fact, but we all go to Google to ask a question, and we're looking for an answer. So whenever you're orienting your content around these buyer personas, think about what questions they're asking and list them out, and start building these lists around the problems that they're looking to solve. It always starts with what's the challenge and what your company does to solve that challenge. So list out several questions that come up. These can come up in sales calls. So if I were to, not think of, an agency or somebody to help guide me through this process, how do I do this myself? First step I'm going to do is work with my sales team and say, who are our buyer profiles? Let's talk about them. And then what are some questions that come up in the sales process, so that we can ask the question and then answer it. And what starts to emerge is this concept of building topic clusters. HubSpot is the leader in writing about this. But the idea is essentially claiming the higher ground in the conversation with a writer. So I mean, with an article. So how do I build my roadmap? I start with the buyer personas. Then I look at what are the topics and what are the questions that they're asking underneath each one of those buyer profiles. And what starts to emerge are the topics that they're asking about. And then you take that topic and then you break it out into subtopics so that you can fill in density around that particular topic. Now that starts to give some shape to a structure. What does my plan start to look like? And then much like these topics and subtopics and then articles have a structure, it's sort of like the trunk of the tree, the branches of the tree, and the leaves on the tree, if you think about it in that analogy. And what we're trying to do is build out expertise and authority around each one of these topics. And so when you think about it in that kind of context, then you start to unpack several ideas around each one of these topics and subtopics and the questions around them. And that starts to inform this list that you end up building, which each one of those topic or article headlines essentially, or questions that people are asking, those become content. That's your that becomes your roadmap. And then from there, you can start to prioritize around what's most important to your business so that you can start writing those first. But that helps to break this whole concept of what do I write about, writer's block. I don't really know where to, take my content, right? So that builds this list that you can attack and you can start chipping away at. So I guess I'll pause there and get your thoughts. I can go on more and more about that, but that's
you and me could talk about this for literally hours. But and I love how you brought in the idea of topic clusters, right? And even if we're talking to someone who is they're a marketer, but they're no search engine optimization expert, right? While topic clusters is definitely you would consider that a search engine optimization strategy, right? Even if you break it down into its simplest parts, I think it helps you figure out a lot of this stuff that kind of leads you there and work your way backwards. So when I talk about topic clusters with people, generally what I say is I don't even say topic clusters, right? I just generally say what do you want to be seen as an expert in? On the internet, right? Because the whole idea of content is building trust with people, right? Especially if you think of something like a consulting company who you're going to go pay them to speak words to you, and that's their product. There's nothing physical. There's nothing tangible. It's pay me a bunch of money and I promise the words I say to you will improve your company or improve your life some way. You need to know that person is an expert in whatever it is you're trying to get better at or the problems that you're trying to solve, right? So but that goes for literally anyone. People don't buy from people they like. They buy from people they trust. And oftentimes people, especially in sales, confuse the idea of liking someone and trusting someone, right? So I love how you brought up the idea of the topic clusters, because that helps you work your way backwards and kind of understand all this stuff at the beginning that you really need to think about. So a couple of things you said there, right? Establishing a buyer persona first and foremost. That is table stakes. For anyone watching this, you cannot get started writing content without thinking about who your buyer persona is, right? And the easiest way to come up with a buyer persona is, just like Andy said, think about what their goals and their challenges are. Because just like you said, when someone Googles something, they have a challenge, they have a question. Every single thing you search in a search engine, whether it's through Google or Ask Jeeves or whatever, every single thing is driven by some sort of goal you're trying to achieve or challenge that's getting in the way. Right. And that's true on the micro and the macro level. So for instance, I want to see cute pictures of puppy dogs, right? That's a goal. That's something you want to do. You're trying to feel good that day. Still a goal. Why is my sales team not hitting their quota in a certain SaaS industry? That's a challenge, right? So no matter how macro or micro it gets, there's always some sort of goal and challenge. So when you're thinking of building those buyer personas, what I would tell people, Andy, usually, and it's aligned with what you said, but for the folks who are kind of confused about it, is I'd say you don't need to go out and pay some giant research firm to, thousands of dollars to go do a bunch of demographic research on your ideal customer.
Right.
You have your salespeople, like you just said. Guess what? They're getting the same questions all the time, and they have some really good insight into who these people are and what their bigger goals and challenges are. But on top of that, you know what your product does. You know what your service does. You know the problem it solves for. And you kind of know who you're selling it to in terms of like what their job title is, what role they play in life. And from that, you can piece together, using some educated speculation when you're first getting started, what their goals and challenges generally are going to be, right? And I don't know if this is the same for you, Andy. I'd love to hear your take on this. I generally always recommend that 90% of your buyer persona document, right? So, you know, whether it's a Google slide deck or a Word document or whatever that has like a fictitious picture of your buyer persona and like the name you give it with some alliteration so everyone can remember it. I generally say like 90% of that document should be goals and challenges. No matter how general or specific you get, the more specific, the better, because that gives you some better information, versus demographic information. Because demographic information, while it's good to have, that's going to help you like buy ad space in the right place. And it's going to help you like target ads maybe. And maybe if you are doing some more traditional media, it helps you there. But like knowing someone is 18 to 35, it doesn't help you write content that they're actually searching for, right?
Such a good point.
So yeah, like it's all about the goals and challenges they have, because that's directly, you know, motivating what it is they search for and what they're going to find value in. So I don't know, like, how do you coach people through that? Like when they're starting to think about their buyer personas and maybe they're getting too in the weeds or they're overthinking it, like how do you generally kind of guide them, whether it's your own folks that you work with or like your clients that you have?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I love the orientation of that, because what your buyers are doing is that they're looking for a solution. They're looking for, hopefully, for your solution. And their aspiration is to make this a relatively easy process. We all go through the questions in our head when we go to a website. If I do business with these guys, is it going to make me look good or look bad to my team? What's different and unique about them? How are they going to help me solve this challenge or problem that I have? These are all natural questions that come up. And Google's written a lot about this EAT framework: expertise, authority, and trust. And so your goal from a content marketing perspective is to build that expertise and authority in the way that you organize your content and making the content useful, so that you're answering these challenges that these customers have. And then through that, you earn the trust of those visitors, because they look at that content and they start digging in and they say, okay, you guys are you're the experts in the field, and I will now, you know, be more open to having a meeting with you. And that's really how this how the flywheel begins to start in that way, is through that engagement. And so you know, think about what these buyer personas, who they are, and then what their aspirations are, like you're saying, what their goals are.
And I think too, and I think too, and this has always been like it's not tough for me because I understand it, but it's been tough for a lot of marketers that I've worked with to kind of, you know, either get into this headspace, or maybe it's like an aha moment that they finally came to. But I feel like a lot of marketers out there pigeonhole themselves into what kind of content they can write about, or like the subject matter, by saying, okay, I'm only limited into writing about what my product or service does, or things directly related to it, right? So like, even if they're writing like an awareness piece of content, okay, you know, they would still, like, while it's not like talking about their product or service, it's talking about a thing that their product or service solves for, right? And while you definitely want to do that, you don't want to let it be like a limiting factor. So like, I use this example all the time where, you know, for the longest time, HubSpot, up until a couple of years ago, we didn't have an integration with Instagram, for example. Like the software didn't integrate with Instagram in any way, right? And a whole bunch of reasons for that, their API, but that's not so important, right? But that never stopped our marketers from writing content about how to market yourself on Instagram, right? Our software didn't do anything with Instagram, but that's fine. we knew we were trying to get marketers' eyeballs on the site by any means necessary and to build trust with them. But we didn't let the fact that HubSpot didn't have an integration with Instagram or didn't do anything with Instagram stop us from making content about Instagram. Right?
Yeah. It's so interesting that you mentioned that, because what oftentimes people will do is they'll do something that feels counterintuitive, which is write a blog post, for example, about the top 20 competitors in the space, the top 10 competitors in the space, of which you may be one. And why would I ever list my competitors on my website, in a blog post? How could I possibly do that? Well, one of the interesting things is that this can be a great conversion point, because people are looking for, competitors to so-and-so software, and you may show up, at the top of that list because you've written an in-depth piece about this. And sure, you can promote your software throughout that blog post, but by taking that somewhat objective perspective on it, and you can highlight strengths and weaknesses of other software or other solutions in the market by doing this, but it gets your voice into the mind share that's going actually in your competitor's direction. So you're inserting yourself into that conversation by virtue of putting those other competitors on the page, in which case, you start to get some of that traffic, which is great. And you also get an opportunity with your own voice to be able to differentiate yourself against the competitors in the way that you want to be differentiated. So it gives you an opportunity to grandstand a little bit in that conversation.
And I think there's also some like bigger picture marketing thinking, like in terms of downstream, in terms of like what customers you are or not getting. Because here's the thing, you don't, especially today, let's say you sell software, right? We'll use software as an example.
Yeah.
You don't just want to sell to anybody that will buy it. You want to sell to the right people for a couple of reasons. One, of course, it's the right thing to do. You don't want to sell snake oil. You don't want to sell someone on the dream and then serve them up a turd sandwich, right? So you want to make sure you're getting the right customers and you're setting good expectations about what your product is and what, more importantly, what your product isn't. Right? So people are informed coming into the buying process. So that one takes a lot of the stress off your salespeople to have to do all the legwork for that. Right.
Yes.
But two, if you're pointing people in different directions and saying like, hey, if you're looking for this other similar solution may be a better option, that's going to reduce the amount of like customers that get to you that shouldn't have bought from you in the first place. Right. So now we're even thinking past the salespeople and we're thinking about like the service and support people who might be getting a customer with very poorly misset expectations because they were sold the dream on something versus sent to the right direction in the first place.
Yeah. It's about retention. Especially the SaaS model. I mean, that is what monthly recurring revenue in that model. So you want to set the expectations properly up front and get a good customer that's going to stick with you long term.
Yeah, and you're adding tons of friction in your flywheel when you inject customers that shouldn't be in it in the first place.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's almost better to steer them. I mean, it's not almost. It's absolutely better to steer them away from your product if it's not going to be a good fit for them than it is to like get that short-term revenue and create a ton of bad experiences for your colleagues in your services team downstream when that person becomes a customer when they shouldn't have in the first place. Yeah. Now, the other thing that I thought was always like super interesting, because the idea of talking about your competitors in a positive light and being honest when they might be a better solution than you are and doing honest comparisons there. To me, kind of falls into the same realm of this other like gut reaction I've gotten from marketers in the past about, we call it giving away your secrets, right? So I don't know if you're a Gary Vaynerchuk fan, but I'm a huge.
I am, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And this is why we get along. So I'm a huge Gary Vaynerchuk fan on my end. And he said this one thing in one of his videos that like really, really stuck with me. And I'm not quoting it verbatim, but it was something like, he was talking to someone and they were like trying to say like, how do I get started with content? What should I be doing? Right. And he's like, if I were you, I'd be creating any content that I could possibly create that would reduce the need from someone to actually buy from me. Right. Tell them how to do all this stuff on their own. So they don't have to hire me. They'd only hire me as a last resort. Right. And when I would try to like tell that to marketers, like for some of them, it would make sense, especially if they've heard of Gary Vaynerchuk because they were familiar with it. But other people would just be like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I give away my secrets, or why would I tell my customers how to like accomplish something on their own without without buying from me? Now, I've got a lot of, thoughts on like why I truly believe in this, but like, I'd love to hear your take on that, because I'm sure the content you create for your customers falls into the realm of doing some stuff like that. And like, maybe they push back, maybe they don't see it, but like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, it's such an interesting point, because what you end up doing is you end up educating your prospect along the way, so that when they become a customer, they become an informed and educated customer, which there's no better customer than that. They know what they want. They know how your solution is going to help them make their lives easier. And can they do it themselves? In some cases they can. If it's a service-based kind of thing, sometimes they can do it themselves versus the software that would really help create efficiency. But even still, if you're a services-based organization, I feel like, the more you're transparent with people in that process, and you demystify a lot of this complexity, you end up building this kind of expertise level with a prospect that you end up winning good customers through that process. You also end up, what will likely happen is that people will go try doing it themselves, and some will be great at that, and thanks for the tip, and that's awesome. And for those people, you've done a good job of helping them get further down the path themselves. Others, if you're like most businesses, you're busy, you're doing things, you don't necessarily have the ability to do it, and you aspire to execute on those goals. And when you are going to take action, you're going to do it with somebody that is informing you, and that's, opening up this, like you said, demystifying, right? They open up the curtain, they say, here's how this very complex thing becomes a straight line. And here's how you approach that. And we all like to learn from people who are both strategic and tactical, and, and take something that's pretty complex and make it attainable. And I now understand that, and I now can act on that. That's all. There's a lot of value in that. So I'm very much a supporter of what you're saying. And that's actually goes back to why we offer this free content marketing playbook, is because it's, it's exactly doing that. Can you do it on your own? Sure. Likely that you're busy, and likely that, you really would rather have somebody who's an expert in that drive that part of the business. And we all like to surround ourselves with people who are better than we are at other things. And that's part of team building, is surround yourself with experts in the area. So, so I think for all those reasons, it's well worth the risk of putting it out there and showing people the value of what you can offer them.
Totally. I love how on the same page we are with this idea, because a lot of people just have this gut visceral negative reaction to like that strategy. Right. And if you like, the way that I would always try to like explain it to people is like, you need to break down the physics of what's happening here. Right. I always talk about this idea of like marketing physics. Like inbound to me is very like psychological physics based a puzzle that you like put together, right? But
there's a velocity that's, that's part of that. And
what's logically going to happen when you do X, Y, Z, right?
And
so like, if we think of this idea, so like in this scenario, there's two things you're doing. You're not giving away your secrets, but like you're creating content, I guess, about your product or service, right? Which is like the gut reaction of most like not super experienced marketers, right? Even some experienced marketers too. But then, because that's like the only way they know it. But then there's the other side of like, you're creating content, but you're truly making it educational, and you're giving away as many secrets as you can and adding as much value as possible so people don't have to hire you, right? So if we think about that first scenario where it's like, you're just creating content about your product or service, right? In both scenarios, there are going to be plenty of people that read the content, do nothing, and forget about it. So let's all just like level set that the mass majority of folks that see your content are going to do jack shit with it. They're not they're not going to take any action. They're going to walk away. They're going to go on YouTube. They're going to forget they ever read it. And that's okay. That's marketing. It's a game of numbers. That's why a good email like click rate is 2%. You know what I mean? Like it's you just have to be okay with that. Right.
Yeah.
So the question is like, okay, the other end of the spectrum is that there's going to be people that actually like read and think about the content, right? For the folks who are just writing about their product or service, if there's no like value in there, they're going to see it. They're going to go, oh yeah, okay, whatever. Or there's going to be some people that say, okay, sure, I'll buy it. Albeit that will be a very minuscule, small amount of people.
Yeah.
But when you're doing the opposite end, when you're giving away your secrets and you're adding a lot of value through your content, one of two things are going to happen. And it's exactly what you said, right? Someone's going to go do that thing and take your advice and go accomplish that goal or challenge on their own. Mm-hmm. And what happens there when you do that, we all talk about creating promoters of our product and of our business, right? And from people who are customers and actually paying us money. But there's also people who can be promoters of your content. Right? Mm-hmm. They could say, hey, go look at XYZ company. They wrote this killer blog post about how to accomplish blah, 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 blah. I went out and did it, and I did it, and it was great. They're smart. I trust them. They're experts. Right. That is way better than someone just reading a piece of your content and going, and just like not actioning with it, right? And then, like you said, the other half of those people, or whatever ratio it's going to be, the other people are going to say, all right, let me try it. They'll go try to do whatever you told them to do and say, wow, this is really hard. I probably need to hire someone to pull it off for me. Who better to do it than the people who've proven that they're experts and I trust already, right? Exactly. And they'll come back and hire you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What we find that from a narrative perspective, what's really interesting about that is when you start with a pain, here's the problem and here's the challenge. You can do a good job of storytelling through this process so that it feels less so that you're not like creating promotional content here. Mm-hmm. What you're doing is you're helping people problem solve and work through the details, and then you present a solution within that. And when you do that and you structure your article, so if you take your blog post, for example, and then you kind of think about this writer's block kind of scenario and how do I break that? Mm-hmm. What I recommend is first start out with an outline and unpack the concept of what you're writing about. So in that outline, you're going to write about what is the problem and the challenge that the prospect is having. And then you're going to talk about the solution to that problem. And that solution can come in 3 or 4, maybe 5 different subtopics that you might want to address in that particular blog post. And then you start filling in what are those 3, 4, 5 solutions that help to address that challenge. You have now it's starting to take shape, and you have this outline. And then you start under each one of those subsections, you start putting in a few bullet points of key ideas that are there. Mm-hmm. And now you're starting to put meat on the bone, and it starts to expand itself out. And then you start to see your article in like this topographical, like a map, right? And now it's just a framework kind of thing. Now there's the structure, there's your scaffolding, it's ready to be built, and then you just start putting meat on the bone from there to add to it. And you might want to add, some content about metrics in the market or pain points, and use factual-based information as you're weaving in your narrative. But all of that helps to be a very tactical way to be able to address what you're talking about, which is, this kind of very broad, how do I do this without sounding salesy or without promoting my own stuff, which just sounds thin, to storytelling and actually providing something of value.
Yeah. And I feel like people are so good at sniffing that out when you're like clearly trying to sell that to someone. Like
we all are, right? We all have like a short amount of time that we have to spend on these things. So everybody goes to a website and scans it. If you've looking at any of these hot jar, kind of where your eyes go on the page, heat map views of things. We all scan the page and we all look very quickly at, is this addressing what I'm looking for? And in fact, we find that articles that have a little key at the top of the article, here's what we're going to solve. You start with a problem, and then here are the solutions, a few bullet points to show here's what's going on down below.
Love that.
That actually really drives engagement, and people will, your dwell time will go up because people will go, oh, this is actually going to offer me some value here.
And they see it quick and it hooks them, right? So
right.
we in training at HubSpot, we talk about this method called the ARC method. So ARC, and it stands for align, reveal, and convince, right? And I love talking about this because it really kind of supports the whole idea of like the marketing physics and the physics of a blog post and what you're literally trying to get a blog post to do. So what align basically means is you need to do whatever you need to do in the first like sentence, paragraph, section, whatever it is, to hook that person into wanting to read and digest the rest of that content, right? To read and digest the rest of that blog article. Because we all got to remember, getting someone to read a blog article is a game of inches. That back button or that left to right swipe is super easy. So like if the first couple of sentences don't like hook them in and make them go, oh, this is me. This is my situation. This is exactly what I'm going through. They're not going to read the rest of it. They're going to go, this is not what I'm looking for. Goodbye, right? So if you don't align with them right at the beginning, they're not going to read the thing, right? So step 2, reveal. That's where like you reveal the solution. And this is so, so important because if a blog article doesn't provide any value, congrats, you've made a piece of clickbait. Right? Like when you say, read this and you're going to find out how to solve your problem. And then you go and read the article and it's just trying to sell you something and they don't learn what they actually intended to learn by clicking on it. They're going to go, oh, cool. Don't trust these guys anymore. And just like that, you've plummeted your trust. And that's like the worst thing you can do by saying you're going to learn something and then you don't, right? So like the blog content itself has to have the thing that gets them closer to achieving the goal or overcoming that challenge, right? That's the physics of the value add there. And then what we got to remember is at the end, and if anyone is a HubSpot user here, or you already know about inbound marketing, you know about these things called calls to action, which are basically just big, bright, beautiful, easy to see buttons, easy to click buttons that tell you, hey, go get this other thing. Go download this ebook, this white paper, this, course or whatever, some other additional piece of downloadable content where eventually they're going to get hit with a form. But you got to remember, they're reading this article and learning about one thing, and then you're hitting them with a button that says, hey, go do this other thing. That C at the end, so the C in ARC stands for convince, and convince basically means, all right, you're asking this person to go do something else. You need to convince them that this next step down here is related to what they just learned and convince them that they're going to continue to get more value out of it. Because like, if they go read an educational blog post about a certain topic and then all of a sudden down at the bottom it says, get a quote for our software. They're going to be like, what does that have to do with what I'm trying to learn? Right? But if it's like, cool, I'm learning about accounting best practices because we sell accounting software. I think that's the example we used when we talked last time, right? Maybe you would have, some sort of piece of content that says, click to download like our ebook on productivity for accounting reps or something like that. Yeah,
or get a free audit of your workflow or whatever it might be. Some sort of something tangible that's like, actually, that's my problem. I don't even know where to start. I have this problem and I need to talk to somebody who's very well versed in solving these problems. That's why I'm on the website. So if you offer something like that, like, a free consult up front, some kind of really amazing offer. Think amazing offer. Don't think just like a little bitty offer. Think of something that's going to really create some value and also align your business with their problem. And solve that. And if you think about that intersection point, what's their problem and what can you offer that's going to help them immediately solve that problem and will also simultaneously build a roadmap for you to continue in your engagement with them. that's a great offer. That's one of those
Value.
make an offer you can't refuse. It's value. Exactly.
The equation for value. And like, so,
Right.
but again, whatever that is, if your blog post doesn't say, because of what you just learned in the words above, this next thing below, this is why it's going to help you go further with that learning.
Yeah.
They're not going to understand the connection and they're not going to do it. But I'm glad you brought up the conversational, like the valuable offer, right? So my favorite thing to do, and I'm going to tell this story to kind of lead us into this discussion. So when I was an implementation specialist back in the day, I say back in the day, it was like 2 years ago. When I was an implementation specialist, the very first thing that I would do with all of my customers is I would just sniff out what the bottom of their funnel was, right? So the bottom of the funnel would generally be like get a demo or get a consultation or whatever. Most people though, and it's crazy that this is, it's pretty much everybody except for software companies, but they're also just as guilty of it. Their bottom of the funnel, their conversion, their form or whatever it was that you filled out to raise your hand and say, I'd like to talk to sales, 90% of the time is just a blank page that says, contact us. Right? Yeah. And it's like this super lame, choose your own adventure. I don't know what I'm getting out of it. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I would always try to sniff this thing out and destroy it as fast as possible, because not only is that one, not compelling in any sort of sense in the world. Two, the person has no idea what they're getting. And three, whoever has to deal with those form submissions is probably getting every single type of request under the sun, most of which are other companies trying to sell them stuff. Right. And if that's the way that your leads get to your salespeople, that's insane. And so what I would do is I'd talk to people. I'd say like, hey, get one of your sales reps to join us on a call and let's have a discussion here. Right. And so the salesperson would join the call and I'd say like, hey, what is the first conversation that you have with a new customer? What do you do? And they go, oh yeah, well, we spend some time getting to know them. We really dig into like what the biggest challenges they have are. We try to give them some tips and tricks on how they can solve it. We start to think if they're going to be a good fit or not. We set up some next steps and we go from there. I'm like, okay, so why don't you tell people that's the conversation you're going to have, right? Mm-hmm. Because to me, that even sounds valuable, right? Where we listen to your goals and challenges, give you some tips and tricks on what you can do. And then at the end, if it makes sense, we talk about if you're going to be a good fit or not, right? Most salespeople these days aren't just getting on the phone saying, okay, this is how much it costs and do you want to buy it? Right? They're building rapport.
That's an order taker. That's not a salesperson, right?
Exactly.
The sales. And going back to what you said, people buy from people they trust. So your primary objective at this point is to establish that trust. And trust is earned. So how do you earn that trust? You do it through education and give to get. That's the opportunity here that I think a lot of people lose sight of. Is this is an opportunity for you to give value and create that value. So, and why do you do that? You do that so that you can get these meetings and you can get these one-on-one discussions. And in that one-on-one discussion, you can then start to add more value and help them solve their problem. And that becomes a consultative, kind of sales process, but it gets you sitting on the same side of the table as your client, solving a common problem for them and how you're going to do that. And that becomes very strategic, and it's a great way to build relationships. And if you orient your content around that kind of modality and that structure, you're going to be adding a lot of value along the way to prospects that come to your website and people who are curious about what you have to offer.
Yeah, and like the thing is like you got to make when people see that landing page or whatever it is where there's a form on it and you fill it out and that hand raises to sales. You need to structure that in a way where, people know I don't have to make the commitment to buy by having this conversation, but they also need to know I'm going to get value out of the conversation, even if I don't buy, right? Otherwise, there's no real reason to fill it out unless you have your credit card in your hand and you want to buy, which, hey, marketers, of all the people that you're talking to, that is like 0.01% of like the folks that you're messaging to that are just immediately ready to buy. There's way more people that are in that category of like, I'm interested, but I'm not sure if it's right for me. And you know what? I don't really want to talk to a sales rep because I know that they're just going to jump down my throat and try to hard sell me something. Because
Right.
that's the perception that we've had of sales.
So those are the middle of the funnel challenges, right?
Yeah.
So if you unpack that, it's a great way to express that. And if you look at what the questions are and the challenges that your buyers have in their journey, and you're addressing that through content and through this whole, so that could be several topics that you're writing about that address what those challenges are. And then you're starting to fill in the meat on the bone with what the solutions are to those challenges. That all becomes really good lead nurturing content. One of the things that I noticed from a lot of the communication with the team at HubSpot is there's a best practice that happens in terms of lead nurturing where something will come up in the conversation, and then 100% of the time there's a relatively brief email with 2, 3, 4, 5 links in that follow-up that are, here's for more content and more information about what we just talked about. Oh, you're having a problem with reports? Here's some good information about how to generate those reports, or here's some information about how to structure the stages in your deal process, or whatever the challenge might be. And there are articles that support that. So if you think about your customers, not only their path to purchase, that's one track, but they're also tactically, how do I do these things? Or questions that come up in the sales process, asking the question and then answering it gives your sales team a really good follow-up with a sales call, so that you can anticipate these are questions that are going to come up. So let me have my email and let me have my template ready together in HubSpot, because it's already it's a well-worn path. You know that these questions are going to come up. So craft the email as a follow-up and have links to the articles already set up so that you're ready to go to deliver what you know the questions are that's going to come up on those calls.
Yeah. It's so much more than just what do you do to get them on the phone with a sales rep. It's like what happens after. You know what I mean? Regardless of if they buy.
Such a huge part of the sales process.
Yeah. And like I'm gonna leave everybody with this. I hit my microphone. I want to leave everybody with this one thing, and then I want to talk to you about SEO a little bit. Because I'm not an SEO expert. I have some very strong feelings around search engine optimization. Maybe they're unpopular opinions. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe I don't know. But I definitely want to run by you. But I want to give everyone like an example of what we're talking about, right? So if you want to buy from HubSpot, the conversation you have, it's like, yeah, sure. Do we have forms on our site that are, for the people who are quick and to the point, where it's like, request a quote, talk to sales? Yeah, sure. We have that. Right. Yeah. But that's not where we focus our time and energy. We have, like, the very first call you have with a sales rep is called an inbound marketing assessment, right? Yeah. Not a, do you want to buy it? Right.
Right.
So like those conversations, we ask you tons of questions about your business, get to understand you as a person, try to figure out what your biggest challenges are, and then give you a whole bunch of feedback and ideas and things you can do about how inbound works for you. Because that's the whole point. It's inbound. It's not the software. We're more concerned that you do inbound, right? And like the thing is, whether you buy or not, you're still walking away from that conversation with a ton of value. But the thing is if you don't advertise or build your, I hate saying the word advertise, even though that's kind of what a landing page does. If your landing page doesn't say, hey, you're going to get a 30 to 60 minute phone call with a XYZ consultant, not a salesperson, even though they are a salesperson. Yeah. You're going to learn about bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. What's the value you're going to walk away from? Not just, are you going to buy it or not? Right. People are going to be way more compelled to request that type of conversation in the first place versus a quote or contact us or like any of that other boring crap that people should stop doing. Right.
That's right. And they're in their discovery process. So recognize that. And what I recommend is start with on a whiteboard by drawing a long straight line. Mm-hmm. That's your customer's path to purchase. And then break it up into discovery, engagement, close, right? Yep. And so these are all different stages. And in those stages of the funnel, you want to be able to have content that supports questions that come up and challenges that your customer is having, so that you can answer those questions and help them solve those problems.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about SEO because we got about 10 minutes left here.
Cool.
So one of the bigger challenges I definitely had with customers is there was a lot of folks who just went all in on the technical SEO mindset versus the content creation mindset. And I almost feel it happens because of one or two reasons. One, maybe like they're trying to avoid content as much as they can and just say like, what are some places I could put some keywords and increase my page load speed and do all this stuff so I can avoid the content conversation, right? Or it would be like consultants who were just SEO consultants kind of leeching off their client a little bit just by saying they needed all these things that they truly didn't understand. So the client would just kind of take it, you know, at face value and pay a bunch of money for them to optimize like a contentless site, right? And so like I often had like lots of customers who just went into this analysis paralysis mode about, all right, I get that I have to start blogging, but like I need to find the keyword with the most views and I need to make sure I optimize it and I need to like get my schema markup the right way. And like they hyper focus on all this SEO bullshit, right? I'm not saying it's bullshit, but like they hyper focus on the SEO details and they lose sight of just the idea of getting good at becoming a content generator, right?
Yeah.
So like, what are your thoughts on like, which one do you do first? Like, should it be get good at SEO first, or should it be get comfortable creating content first and then have the SEO stuff come after? Because for me, I think you need to get good at creating content first, because if you don't have the content, you have nothing to optimize. So what's the point of freaking out about SEO if you aren't already used to creating content? To me, that's the hardest part. So like I'm in the school of thought of just like, hey, get to blogging once a week before you really start thinking about SEO and start to layer the SEO stuff in afterwards. But I mean, you've been doing this stuff for a while, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
This is the great frame up. And I think there are a few ideas that, as you were saying that came to mind. One is inbound as a strategy overall is really seeing the forest through the trees. You know, when you're trying to think about a lot of this technical SEO stuff, really what you're saying is I'm going to try to reverse engineer Google's algorithm and I'm going to try to game the system. And anytime you're trying to game Google, you're just going to, there's so many versions of their algorithm that they release on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You're just going to get caught in this trap.
Yeah.
And it's just not, so what you want to do is you want to, this forest through the trees kind of concept, how do you then map your course through that forest so that you can you can build up topic density and you can kind of take this this broader macro view in it. And so that there are technical SEO tactics that you can and should be doing. For example, on blog posts, you want to do a lot of interlinking through your website. You want to, you know, and HubSpot talks about this a lot in the pillar posts, and how, you know, those pillar articles are the trunk of the tree, so to speak. And then the branches on that are the subtopics around that. So interlinking through these articles is critical. At the end of blog posts, having relevant blog posts so that you can recycle that traffic and keep them digging in deeper for more information that's contextually relevant. That all is like really good on page SEO best practice kind of stuff. So I would definitely, you know, do some focus on the content. You're absolutely right. Is build your content roadmap and your messaging so that it becomes useful. Yeah. Useful is the key of this. You want it to be useful content for your readers. Then as you publish the content to your website, think about, there are some technical best practices and things that are going to give you better results than others. Table stakes kind of stuff that you have to do. So yes, your meta description and your title tags and your H1 tags all need to align with what the content is, and you know, all of that needs to line up, and HubSpot has a great tool set to be able to do that. So I'd recommend doing that from a technical perspective, but don't get caught up in trying to reverse engineer Google or trying to get into this technical battle, because that's just a losing proposition that will happen ultimately at some point when they change their algorithm. Whereas if you build this structural content marketing approach that aligns around creating useful content for your buyers and organizing your content through this topic clustering kind of methodology, what you end up doing is you end up building density within the topic of useful information that then becomes reasons for why people are going to link to you, so that you're going to earn backlinks from that because it's useful. And you're also going to be able to do best practices on page that address the tactical SEO reverse engineering aspect of it, but not go in the deep end of that. Should you use, proper schema markup and do that kind of stuff? Sure, if you have the knowledge of how to do that, and then definitely do that. But lead with your content and your messaging, because that's what people really want to engage with. And Google is continually optimizing their algorithm around what's useful for people, and they're looking at all kinds of metrics to be able to optimize their algorithm around that.
Yeah. And you got to be smart where you spend your mental calories, right? Like writing content alone is tough enough. Never mind if you layer on the stress of trying to perfect the SEO, right? One more thing before I let you go. And I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on this. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of like, a marketer that's working at like a traditionally outbound company, right? So a company that's been, they're all in on mailing people stuff and buying radio ads and doing TV spots and purchasing lists, which is a whole nother thing we can talk about. Oh my God, that makes my blood boil. I'm sure you feel the same way. But let's say we're that, we're that marketer who's seen the light of inbound, right? We did some research, tried to figure out the whole blogging thing, and we're like, oh, inbound's this whole thing, right? Yeah. And like they want to get the rest of the company on board with making that fundamental shift of an outbound marketing company to an inbound marketing model, right? I've had plenty of customers who have had a super difficult time getting buy-in from leadership on doing this, because they've been doing things one way for a long time in the way that they think marketing should work, because they've watched plenty of episodes of Mad Men or whatever it is. Like, they're doing things the traditional way. And all of a sudden their marketer comes up and says, hey, I'm going to spend a bunch of time writing blog posts and giving away our secrets and creating content and doing stuff on social media. Maybe I might mess around with video a little bit, right? And, leadership goes, oh, so we're not sending out mailers. We're not doing all this stuff that's been working for us in the past. What sort of advice do you have, like, for that marketer who's like truly being the pioneer of switching things to an inbound model, when there's someone who's getting a lot of pushback from leadership on taking this path of creating content? Yeah. Like, what sort of advice would you give in kind of in general to those folks?
Well, ostensibly, this business has customers already. So they know who their buyer persona is. Yeah. They also probably have, paid search campaigns and other campaigns where they know what keywords are converting and what those ad groups are, i.e. clusters. Yeah. And what messaging is working already, right? That's already probably somewhere in the mix. So their salespeople are having conversations with prospects. So while they're having these conversations, what are the questions that are coming up in those sales calls? And maybe what I would do is lead with, how can we create content that supports our current sales process already? Like, we don't need to go breaking what already works. That's not the objective here. The objective is, how do we help reduce friction in the sales process, right? So maybe start out with that, because that's content. You need to develop content around that. So talk with the sales team, figure out what kind of questions keep coming up and what kind of content that you can produce that will help inform and be a great follow-up with a prospect, either after a call or maybe like if you haven't heard from that prospect in a while, you're checking in and you're thinking about them. And here's a useful piece of content that we wrote that is relevant to what we talked about on our call a few weeks ago. And try to lead them back in with something educational that can help inform them.
Yeah.
I would start there as a beachhead, because that's going to be something that aligns with the current go-to-market strategy that that company already has.
Yeah.
Right. And start with that. And then from there, you can start to show metrics on before and after. Before we had this content, this is our close rate. These are our metrics in our funnel. And then after we start adding content, you can see that we remove friction in the process, and content is useful. So when we start to get that little bit of buy-in, that's a foot in the door into this whole path. So now you want to feature and showcase the success that you got from that as an initial step. Then from there, you can start to build out other parts of your content roadmap that aligns around what inbound is, without necessarily having to say, you know, we're going to out with the old, in with the new, I have all the answers. It's not necessarily about that kind of a paradigm. What it is more about is what we're going to do is we're going to educate our prospects more so that they can become better customers, and look at metrics like retention. It is part of this whole, you know, content marketing initiative. And by the way, content marketing doesn't stop with the sale. You want to drive loyalty, and you want to drive more awareness and education, and you want to be able to provide content to your existing prospects that become customers, so that they can then evangelize and educate their team more about stuff that they're now doing with this new solution that helps to, you know, expand that sale, for example, or educate more people in your customer's company, so that you retain those customers longer and you get more mind share and buy-in within that company.
Yeah. And I love that, because like, here's the thing, you have an executive that like, here's the thing, if they understood inbound, they'd probably be like, yeah, great, I've been waiting for someone to do this the whole time. And like, because they know the benefits of it. But, you know, the common thing that like leadership who doesn't understand inbound is going to know is money talks, right? So like when you're trying to pitch this or justify it, just like you said, going after and making an artful case on how it will improve inefficiencies in your sales process and really have an impact on the bottom line, which is new sales and retention of current customers. That's what's going to pique their interest. And if you can make the case and talk about the physics of how that's actually going to support those things, you should have a pretty easy time getting buy-in. But like, you're right, you need to be showing these, you know, initial quick wins that you're getting. And like, there are like a lot of
and these are like, this is substantial, you know, part of like, this is evergreen content. Once you write the content, it becomes, you write it once and it lives forever, and it keeps working for you. Whereas, you know, advertising is kind of like a sugar-based diet a little bit, and you got to keep, you know,
you got to keep feeding it. Yeah,
you do, and you have to keep paying up for it. Whereas, you know, this becomes, you know, a longer term strategy. The two can work very closely together, where in this particular scenario with this outbound company, if they know what keywords are converting already, for example, in their paid search campaign, then build content around those keywords so that you can try to increase your ability to rank organically for those keywords and acquire customers for less overall as a result. That's also a great place to start. Yeah.
And I think also there's, you know, I don't know if like you have to be delicate about it, or maybe you be blunt about it and like, hey, you know, this isn't something that's going to have a like happen overnight, but it's something that like looking a year or 2 or 3 down the line is going to put us in a much better position to be a thought leader and like have this grow exponentially over time, because it takes a while to build up that authority. But if we can get the legwork out of the way now, we're going to be much better set up for success in the years to come. Right.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, hey, we're at about an hour right now. Andy, that was super fun. Looking forward to whatever we talk about next. I'm sure we'll come up with something. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Before we kind of like end this, can you tell the people like where they can find you, where they can learn more about Write For Me, all that kind of stuff, just in
Absolutely.
case there's anyone out there that could use your services?
I love it. Yeah. So go to writeforme.io
Mm-hmm.
and you'll find lots of content about what we do and how you can help increase your ability to execute on your content marketing strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone watching at home, hopefully this is going to give you like some good tips on like where you can get started creating content. But again, if you get to that point where it's too hard and you got to bring in the big guns, Andy here and his team can definitely help you out. But hey, we'll leave it at that. And thanks everybody for watching. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Max.
Thank you.